Good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to this webinar session. Thank you for joining us today for the value of appreciation, how to build a recognition program that works. My name is Natasha Safronova, and I'm marketing strategist and head of product marketing here at SoGoSurvey, a company on a mission to build the world's best feedback platform to power the world's smartest decisions. And here with me today is Melissa Kratz, VP of Success. Hi, Melissa.
My pleasure to be with you all today.
We are going to talk about appreciation and recognition program that works. We have structured the agenda around the following 4 items that you see on the screen here. We are going to talk about why appreciation and recognition really deserve this renewed attention in today's workplaces. Practical tips for building a strategic recognition program and what we mean by strategic recognition program. Also, how to ensure that recognition program that you are implementing actually drives the recognition culture in your company. And finally, 3 ways how you could measure success of your efforts. But before we get started, let's talk about a few housekeeping details just to make sure we all have the best webinar experience possible. As you may have already noticed, everybody has been muted by default. But if you have a question or a comment during any time of this webinar, please use the Q&A or chat widgets in the bottom of your screen. Just click there, send your question or comment to all attendees, and we'll bring it up and address it in the conversation as we go. Also, we're going to have dedicated Q&A time at the end of this webinar. If you prefer to ask your questions that way, that is perfectly fine too. And with that, let's get started. But before we begin and actually start talking about what we have prepared for you today, I have one question that we want to ask you. I'm just really curious what brings you to this conversation today. I'm going to launch poll here in just 1 second. You will see it on your screen. Let's see. All right. So you should see it now. This is multi-choice question, so feel free to choose everything that applies to you. We would just give a few more seconds and then we'll discuss the results and then we'll move right in. All right, perfect. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. And Melissa, what do you think?
I think it feels like a trick question because all of these are the right answers. And I hope that all of you, other is fine. And we don't know what other is either way, so no problem. So obviously that retention question we're talking about, retention, whether it's not losing people, whether it's strictly keeping them, maintaining those employees that you currently have. Attracting new ones sometimes seems very far away if you're really focused on keeping those you have. But recognition, ideas, and strategy, that one's for you, Natasha. So ideas I'm really excited about. Natasha's the one who helps keeps us on track with making sure there's strategic ideas too. So good news here, you are not alone, right? Like that idea that everyone is looking for recognition ideas, which is the beginning of our conversation for today. So really starting to think about what do we actually mean when we talk about recognition. So I sort of making a little joke of this, but what does it mean when you actually recognize people? So we all come to sort of with different assumptions, different understandings of the word recognize and how we're using it here today. And I think it's really important for us to think about just a whole spectrum of what recognition means. First of all, if you don't recognize the people that you're working with, you literally have no idea who they are, that's probably a bad sign. So sometimes this happens where you say like, oh, that team or that office or that. Sometimes when you don't have that knowledge in the first place of who those people are even on your team, that's a pretty low level of recognition, meaning 0, right? So starting that to that baseline level of awareness, who are the people, as Mr. Rogers would say, who are the people in your neighborhood? Getting to know the people in your team, in your department, the people that you work with, your customers, of course, as well, too. Getting to know them even by name. Yes, that's a person. That person has a real name. That person has a real job. That starts that level of respect that we're talking about building on. Acknowledging who that person is, what they contribute to, sort of recognizing the value that they bring to the organization, why they're here. Yes, hello. This is greeting in the hallway when you pass someone, or just waving at them on a conference call as well too. Oh, how's it going? That's that baseline level. Engagement is really when you start to interact with that person on a level that recognizes we're colleagues, we're peers, we have something to gain from interacting with each other. I see the value in engaging with you. I'm not just being polite, hello, nice to meet you. Where we start to get to that next level of outreach is, oh, Natasha is so great to work with. She's an expert in product marketing. When I have a question about this, I'm going to reach out to her. I recognize her as an expert in this area. I see the value that she brings to this organization, and I'm happy to reach out to her. She hopefully feels like, Melissa's reaching out to me. She starts to feel that, but it's how I put it out in the world. The last one is celebration. And while we're talking about this today and what are sort of the degrees of celebration, me just shouting, oh my gosh, Natasha's so great, is a really awkward thing maybe for Natasha to hear, but also it really has any number of degrees. It might be me saying to her, I really enjoy working with you. I'm so glad we get to do this webinar together. It might be me telling all of you all of this information about her. So not to make her blush, of course, in this conversation, but keeping in mind that there are lots of degrees of recognition, from simply knowing people's name to out and out celebrating them for the value that they bring to your conversations, to your organization, and making everything better. Natasha, I recognize you.
Thank you so much. I definitely feel recognized. I also feel like I am blushing a little bit, like maybe not a little bit even, but I do think that this is such a valid point here, Melissa, because what I've seen is that many recognition programs are built around the tenure, around those like huge milestones that obviously is absolutely a must to be recognized for, but that should never be the only thing. And it's very, very important that people feel recognized on a daily basis, just for who they are, for what they bring, for value that they bring to organization. And actually that, I think, brings us really nicely to our next slides here.
What an astonishing segue, right?
I know, right? Absolutely. So I have a few stats here. Why appreciation and recognition deserves this renewed attention in today's workplaces. We've all heard about Great Resignation. Maybe we've been part of it, or our organizations experienced it. There are multiple studies out there and lots of statistics, but I just wanted to bring this one up, very recent from the study just published at the end of summer by Gallup. And what they found out is that 74% of people who are looking for a new job today, who are part of this Great Resignation movement, they are disengaged, and that's the main reason why they're looking for a change. There are different people are driven by different factors. Somebody might work more flexibility, somebody wants more money, somebody wants promotion, but overall, there are multiple ways for people to get really what they are looking for within their organization if they're engaged, if they feel like they belong to the organization. And disengagement just really at a core of high turnover rates that we've been experiencing lately. On the positive side, there are also other stats. You see, it's our same person who was just disengaged on the previous slide. Now he's happy and smiling. He's among those 63% of employees who are recognized for their work. And so he's unlikely to leave his job. The other really interesting stat here is that 40% of employed Americans feel that they would put more energy in their work if they're recognized more often. So that's, again, back to that Melissa's point, is that recognition is not just acknowledging somebody's like really huge contribution in achieving this like amazing strategic goal that we had in mind, which again is very, very important, but you put energy in, or you expected to put energy in your work daily. So how do we keep people motivated? Just simple thank you and recognition goes really a long way here. But that being said, keeping people happy also pays off. So if you see this last stat here on the slide, about 14%, basically says, and that is again a recent study by Deloitte this time, employee engagement, productivity, and performance are 14% higher in organizations with recognition culture. So that's your direct contribution to that return of investment, to that bottom line and ROI, which is...
Natasha, I'm just looking at this happy, smiling employee. He really turned things around since the last slide. Like, are you saying that ROI is more important than this happy smile?
I absolutely was prepared for you to say that because I work with you on a daily basis. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that we absolutely need to know our audience. I'm sure that everybody who's on this call today in the people services in HR function, because they just genuinely care about people. They want people to be happy, to be engaged. Work is like really a huge part of our lives. So that is absolutely needs to be a very good, pleasant experience. But the big point here is that for all employee engagement efforts and for really working recognition programs, you need some budget, you need some investment. And so you need to be able to be in a room with, let's say, head of sales, who's also competing for that budget and for investment with you. And you need to be able to say that what I'm doing here also is really, really important for the success of our organization and for our business. Would you agree with that, Melissa?
I would agree with you. I cannot argue with that. I think everyone, you're exactly right. Everyone who knows me knows that happiness is a pretty important metric for me, seeing people smile on a daily basis. But you're right, it's really hard to go into sort of a budget allocation type meeting and say, we need to see more smiles. Like that's a really sometimes hard argument. So exactly right. Knowing the audience who's on this call versus the audience that needs to help make those decisions about budget, for example. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So knowing your audience is obviously a consistent theme that we're talking about here today. But it brings us to, what are we talking about today? Strategic recognition. How can we actually bring this down from this lofty idea of strategic recognition? What does that actually mean? So to start us off, I have an important diagram here. So Natasha, I'm going to go ahead, as you might expect, and challenge you to answer this question. Which of these balloons is the strategic balloon?
Thank you very much for putting me on the spot here. Well, I do think that's a really good question. And I do think that's what really defines the strategicness of each of these balloons is why did you actually blow them up in the first place? Is there a reason behind it? Is there a specific objective that you're trying to achieve with that balloon? Who is this for? What are we trying to do? And how are we going to measure the success?
These are all good answers, Natasha. I mean, obviously we all know the answer is the one on the left, as we can clearly see. But obviously the point is well taken. It's context that matters. Is it because someone had a birthday? Is it because someone has a webinar today and we want her to be really excited about it and prepared for it, that sort of thing. So knowing a little bit of what is happening, who is it impacting, and why is this happening in the first place? Is it aligned, in fact, with those lofty, up in the air strategic goals that we have? Little balloon jokes. I promise we're not going to have too many balloon-related jokes, but some of those lofty ideas, we really need to look at what they mean on a practical basis. So we've aligned them into 4 key questions to help us focus on answering these questions.
Right. So strategic. How do you make your balloon strategic? And how do you make sure that your recognition program is strategic? And the first and immediate answer here is that you need to make sure that you know what are your business objectives and you tie your recognition program to those business objectives. So definitely thinking about what is that important for your organization, what is your organization as a whole is trying to achieve. Is this overall, let's say you are in healthcare and it's patient satisfaction, or do you need to work on the like better customer service because that's where the complaints are, and this is where you could improve as the organization as a whole. So thinking about that and tying those recognition goals to your overall business goals is super important. And just to put it in a context a little bit, like what do we mean by that is that for a recognition program to work, there needs to be a full transparency for everybody. Like what should they recognize other people for and what could they be recognized for? Because then you're motivated, then you know what you're trying to achieve. So let's say that customer service is the area that your organization overall focused on. So how could you tie your recognition program to that? You could definitely think of like like what are the right metrics? How is the success? How would the success be measured? So maybe you would tie those recognition call outs to number of calls that are taken by each customer service representative, Or maybe that's not the right metric. And maybe that would be the amount of resolutions provided during the calls. Or maybe that is that overall customer satisfaction metric that is also needs to be tracked. And then you just need to know your baseline, and you need to know how are your efforts contributing to like those overall objectives. And this way, by thinking in advance of what are those big corporate metrics that would resonate with your leadership team, that would resonate with your overall organization, how are you able to know where you are with those metrics, and how are you then able to track what are you doing in the recognition area and how that really affects the results. There are obviously like so many different areas where recognition would have the tremendous impact on, and that would be customer satisfaction, that would be overall employee satisfaction, engagement, and we'll talk a little bit about those metrics further in the presentation. But it's also like really important to know where you are, what is important for like outside of your division, for your CEO, for overall like, your leadership team. And so you are able to show that the results that you're tracking here are also helping your organization to achieve those goals that they're trying to achieve. Because the very important item here to really realize is that while the owner of the recognition program, to set up a recognition program, it might be in your hands, but really the overall success, HR could not be the only person, the only department who is accountable for that success, or I would say responsible for that success. And so with that, I really want to direct a question back at Melissa, because she is the owner overall of recognition efforts and program in our organization.
I am in charge of recognition, even though we're going to say to you, that's a terrible situation, right? Like the funniest thing. So I think you're right. Like I would like to look at this a little bit from the client success point of view, spend a lot of time on that. Like there's so many different facets of client success. If we have more chats, or if we have more clicks on our newsletter, or if we have more phone calls or scheduled trainings, does that mean we're doing a better job? Not necessarily. I would like to see fewer of them in some cases, because that means that the platform itself is more intuitive. So there are different metrics. So even though we're looking at it a little bit in some occasional silos, right? People in charge of client success are really worried about these metrics. People in charge of product are worried about these. People in charge of HR are worried about everything. So I think this is also, it's a really interesting point, because we say like, whose job is recognition? Well, if that's the question, you probably have an unfortunate answer. Like if it's like, it's me, what you've done is put all of that power, all of that like responsibility on one person. If it's your HR director, for example, like great, it's probably a good setup to start with. But the idea is that's not where you need to stop, right? The idea that like whoever is in charge of client success, or a support team, or account managers, so whoever they're involved with, there should be so many levels of recognition aligned with all of those metrics. Like, hey, I see that you hit that goal that we were talking about the other day. That's awesome. Someone in HR doesn't necessarily know all of those sort of nitty-gritty details. So in the area of recognition, a lot of time we're talking about from the HR perspective, building a culture of recognition. So making sure that you're facilitating that, highlighting that that's a goal, not necessarily dictating how it needs to be celebrated or how people need to be recognized. But if there's only one, recognizer in chief, and they are exclusive about that, no one else is allowed to give awards, or it's like you just have this magic wand, like, I recognize you, like everyone should have a magic wand to be able to recognize each other. Because also too, what it means is if we have this sort of weird top-down approach, it doesn't take into account this last question that we have, which is recognition means something different to every team member that you have. So if I shout out, Natasha's so great, Natasha might be all about that. She's in marketing. She recognizes word of mouth is positive. Like that's something that we want to be able to celebrate. But it could easily be the worst way. It could be so terrifying for people to be shouted out in a large big meeting. We'll talk more about the strategies a little bit. But the closer you are to the people who are actually performing those awesome things that we want to recognize, completing those calls or following up with those clients, or even doing internal work as well, those are the people who can say, hey, I saw that you did this thing. That was awesome. Everyone should be the recognizer in chief. Everyone should have a magic wand because we know each other well. And I know that Natasha is okay with having this sort of giggly, like you're so great kind of feedback. Whereas if I thought it made her uncomfortable, it would be a terrible thing to do, especially in front of other people. So it helps us to be more respectful when we're recognizing people that we know a little bit better personally, rather than HR says, everyone gets a balloon. By the way, we all like balloons too, in most cases, so not a problem, and definitely a good idea to start with. But once you get into that more nuanced approach of understanding what that means in your culture, it often relies on the people who are a little bit more side by side. Natasha, do you feel embarrassed now that I've just shouted you out so many times?
I actually feel really good right now, but I gotta say that I do have a very personal example where I did feel embarrassed, while the intent was actually very opposite. In my previous world, in my previous life, we had a tradition to celebrate birthdays at work. It was back in the days where everybody was working from the office, like it was big company, big team. And so we had this tradition of celebrating birthdays with a cake and like a little gathering during lunchtime. However, for my birthday, I had to wear the tiara, like princess tiara, and I was given this pink sparkly band, and it definitely wasn't the best experience. I totally understand why I was given that, because the person who wanted to make it special, for me, that was their way of making it special. But I gotta say, I felt really, really embarrassed. There was leadership team represented there. There was our CMO, and yeah, that was like the last place I wanted to be at that point. I learned my lesson though. And I also gotta say, as like somebody who was never really at the HR side of things, but I always welcome the situations where our people leader would come and say, so how, like, help me like to understand what the success looks like for your team and how we could make our recognition program work. So it really is meaningful and it's working, and you're able to recognize the results, the successes, your team members, a little bit more in a formal way, but that it's really tied to overall what you're trying to achieve with the team.
So actually asking people for their opinions is what you're saying? That seems kind of obvious, but I think
that seems very obvious. Yeah, that seems very obvious. And I'm sure that everybody's probably shaking their heads, but there is this other stat right here, and only 60% of organizations tie recognition to business goals, which means that there are also the other 40 that don't. And that's at the end will really result at the, we don't even know if that works or doesn't, because we are not really able to properly track the success. So don't be those 40%.
That's the balloon on the right, people. They're just not doing it right.
Right, that's not a strategic balloon. All right, so next section here is how to ensure that recognition actually drives your organization's culture, because that's, again, extremely important. Only if recognition and appreciation is part of the organizational DNA, only if everybody is on board, then the recognition program would work and bring the results that it's intended to bring. So another few stats here, and I believe those are probably last stats, because I really love numbers, as you could tell. I tried to put them everywhere when Melissa allowed me to. So these stats actually say that 75% of people are satisfied with a thank you for their everyday efforts, which basically tells that recognition and appreciation is not always, does not really always need to be tied to monetary, to like big budgets, to that monetary value. People do like to just hear thank you, but also hear it in a different way. Somebody wants it written, like as the 36% of women who were participating in this study by Gallup again. So they said that they would prefer that you make that extra effort and put that thank you in writing. Again, understanding what works, asking here and listening, like what works, what's not. Is it like a shout out in a big meeting? Is this a formal note that they could bring to their evaluation, performance evaluation at the end of the year and say, see, look, I am collaborative. I've got this 20 thank yous throughout the year. I'm really important and I deserve that promotion or whatever is on the mind of that person. But just the power of thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this powerful stuff. I do. And I wanted to highlight too, I think the thing about putting it in writing, I think sometimes when where in school we have like, this will be part of your permanent record, like it's serious. When we start, but we say something about like putting it in writing. In some cases, this is like a post-it note, like, hey, nice job. That's great. Like it's real. Like the effort that you put in for that webinar or for whatever that call that you were on that went so well, that's over, but you still have a nice note that says that. So it doesn't have to be something super fancy. The sort of the performance evaluation versus the post-it note. There's a whole spectrum there. So we love to send cards here. It's something that we do all the time. So various occasions, of course, too, but also like, we're just happy you're here, or like, nice job on that, whatever. I try not to send cards that say nice job on that, whatever. But the post-it note is a really nice one. So in writing doesn't have to mean that it's super formal, but it's something tangible and it's positive for people as well. So to touch on some of those things, just underscoring how we build a better balloon. Notice this balloon, this is basically the opposite of every balloon. Every balloon is like, ta-da, showy, all of this kind of stuff. But I think reiterating that point of thinking about how do your preferences align with the preferences of your employees, of your team members, whether it's as an organization or whether it's your close team members that you work with on a daily basis as well. That example of, don't you want a tiara? Yeah, you know you do. Maybe you don't. Maybe I want a tiara, so I'm telling you that you want one as well too. If you think about it from the perspective of like my background is in education, so we have, as teachers, we often teach the way we would like to learn, but that doesn't mean that that's how our learners like to learn. The same is true here with recognition. So aligning the preferences, this often means directly asking the question, shocking development. There are so many things that I wanted to list in this second section. This slide was exploding. I just have to tell you, there were so many things going on in here, but I think there are two different ways to think about how and when recognition is encouraged. Of course, if you're building the right culture, all the time is the answer, but there are a couple different angles. One is the systematic approach, and one is just whenever it happens, that ad hoc approach. So institutionally, like at the organizational level, which sometimes does involve an HR team, something like an internal newsletter that goes out every month. P.S. We do this. I'm not saying it's the greatest thing in the world, but it's a really fun thing to be able to do, to be able to just say, here are the birthday, here are the milestones in people's lives. Here was what we said in our recent pulse check. All of that kind of feedback, letting people know you have been heard, meaning I recognize you, we recognize you. Employee of the month, employee of the release, based on specific occasions. Those are systematic. Every time there's a release, there's an employee of the release, for example. Milestones either in their personal lives, in their professional lives, and how long they've been with the company, all of those different pieces, performance reviews on a regular cycle. All of those are systematic organizational things to do. There is a long ... at the end of that as well too. And those are things that we expect to have happen, that the organization can set up for, can build into part of the culture, knowing that those are things that we know, oh yeah, let's mention them at the next all hands meeting. All of these things can feed into multiple levels of recognition. I'm not going to stand up at an all hands meeting and say, Natasha gave me this post-it note, I just wanted everyone to know. Maybe there's some things that we filter through in different ways, but amplifying that, being able to say, wow, looks like you got a post-it note. That's great. Being able to amplify that, and, it sort of enhances the benefit and sort of the power of that recognition as well too. But the ad hoc options are also good, and that comes from having a culture in which people are comfortable talking to each other, enjoy talking to each other ideally in the first place. They don't come to meetings afraid to chat, ideally. Of course, we could chat all day if we needed to. We're generally there to do some work, but even general icebreakers in normal conversation. It doesn't need to be, now we will have an icebreaker. We will have fun. We will like it. Let us commence, right? So we think about some of these like corporate retreat style icebreakers, which can be very elaborate, which can be very complicated. They don't need to be. So icebreakers can literally mean just breaking the ice, talking about how things are going, talking about celebrating the things that we hear. Going back to that systematic approach, it's something that we do every week here. We have a Monday Matters, Friday Forum. We like to check in with each other just to see what's going on personally and professionally. It's part of that structured approach, but it means that people are more likely to understand what's going on in each other's lives. Awesome job, you built the greenhouse in your backyard. That's so cool. That is not something I did on my weekend, but I would never know if I didn't ask questions like that. So chat in general, We love the GIF parade. GIF parades are really fun to be able to do stuff like that, depending on Slack, Teams, whatever you're using for chat functionality, being able to build in some of that positive conversation and celebrating things like whether it's, hey, we got this really great feedback from a client, which we did yesterday, and I shared it. And it wasn't just because of this webinar, it's because I was really excited. I wanted to amplify that good news to be able to share it with all of the people who are impacted. Values, that's something that aligns with our strategic goals as well too. We have core values. We want to be able to recognize the people, and it's an open nomination process. So anybody can send in that feedback. I noticed this person was exemplifying our value of service. Here's what they did. Shine award, a specific word. You can make up your own acronym, but somebody has a high impact new idea. I want to be able to say, this person did this amazing thing that changed the way we do business. That's cool. Set up those things that are priorities for you. Is it innovation? Is it maintaining traditions? What are the kinds of things that are the biggest priorities for you? I also put on this little one here at the end, SoGomatic, which is a super fun one. Yes, some of these are tech-related solutions, and this is the most tech-sounding. But this is a really fun little survey that we built as almost a viral recognition survey, which is like, I fill out this form. It's almost like Mad Libs. I say, Natasha, she is so great, all of these things. And it sends an automatic message I think we might send this as a follow-up to people who attend this webinar because I enjoy this immensely. And part of it is it's a chain, right? Like you were recognized, that idea of being able to pass on that recognition to other people. So last thing, what does it look like? I was thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm about to write SMART goals. But yeah, all of these are things, the things that make good feedback. Yes, great job doing that thing. Okay, good effort. But the more specific it is, measurable, relevant, timely. If I wait 3 weeks to tell you, that was a good comment in that meeting, right? Like, okay, you might be like, yeah, great job, me, but what are you even talking about? So keeping it timely, making it specific. If your comment is, I really liked how you smiled in that meeting, that's great. That's helpful. People know what they're being recognized for. It's not just showing up, it's being part of the conversation. And so being able to say, I like how you is a really important part in that feedback, rather than just like, hey, it's you. As we said, awareness is a good place to start. I'll stop, Natasha. I've got a lot. I wanted to fit so much on that slide. Sorry. Just stop.
And I actually also feel very tempted to add something here, because what I really love about this slide and your talking point here is that the variety of options, because for recognition program to work, to become part of that culture, it's really, really important that it's easy for people to do it. And not everybody is that extremely maybe creative and can like put the paragraph of like why they want to recognize somebody. But that's why that like SoGomatic comes in place, where all you just need to do is just to choose a word from the drop down, and it does the work for you. But it's also like really fun. You feel like you could do it. It's fun to receive, it's fun to send, and it's very, very easy for people. And especially in today's world where some of us are fully back to the office, some are hybrid, some are fully remote, some are mixed. Like how do we make sure that everybody is like feels part of the team and feels empowered to recognize others? And so like it's really easy for them to participate, and it's something that they could do and be part of this, and really get them on board, and create this like all these tools with your employees in mind. And experimentation, I feel like, is a big word here, because what works for one organization might not necessarily work for the other. But thankfully, there are so many different tools, creative ideas, like that's where you just need to track and see what works, what doesn't. And that actually brings us to our next section, which is like, how do you track the success?
I cannot believe how successful these transitions are.
I feel like I've been recognized too many times during this webinar. All right, so let's talk about the 3 ways how to measure the success of your recognition program. How do you know that what you're doing is working? So one is, and probably it's number 1 because it's my favorite, because I like numbers and I like to tie everything. I always challenge myself to do that in marketing, which is my area. Like, how is what I'm doing here really helping the business? But I think it's also really important for all other areas in the organization. So how is this program that you're working on helping the business, helping those big goals? So we mentioned a little bit in the beginning, it's really important to know what those business objectives are. And so in this particular case, the recommendation is really simple. Know that baseline before you start introducing new efforts, like doing something, you know where you are with those big organizational metrics. So in our case, you see those two lines there. Is it like blue and teal? So one of them is customer satisfaction score and the other one is employee satisfaction score. So you see that something was like happening, it was going down at some point, and that's where this organization decided that it's time to revamp our recognition program. So they, like you see the milestones. So in April, they've created this, they formed employee recognition committee. So just open forum, letting everybody who is interested to contribute their ideas on how to change our recognition program, join this workforce and start contributing to that. And then months later, they kicked off the new recognition program. And then another month later, they celebrated their first monthly value awards. And then another month later, they introduced lunch, like free lunch opportunity where you could invite somebody to join you. So it could be really whatever those milestones are for your organization. The whole idea here is that know what you're doing and track the success and see how like the experiments that you're running, what you are introducing and implementing is really impacting those big business goals that you're after. And again, in this case, it's satisfaction scores. It might be that retention rate. It might be, I don't know, like the new applicants that are coming for your position, because word of mouth is really important. You know, you increase loyalty of your employees and they would be more likely to promote those open positions and spread the word around their networks. And so that will also end up result in bigger number of really valuable applicants for new jobs. So again, like depending on what that area is, just know those objectives and make sure you diligently track the progress. And again, like some ideas here in what we talked about, retention, productivity is another really good one. People who feel, if you remember that stat, people who feel recognized, they are willing to contribute more effort in their everyday job, which obviously will result in better and higher productivity. So that's one way.
Let me just underscore before we move on to the next slide. I want to underscore experiment is a word that you use, which I totally support and agree with, because it's not like, oh, this is the right way to do it. There's a lot of right ways to do it. Start small, take some small risks, figure out what works for your small team, start to see how it works. I think that's a really important keyword, that there's not like, oh, I didn't get the correct book, so I don't know how to do it yet. There's no wrong way to do it in some cases, and it's really about getting started. So experiment, underline, double underline.
Right, and that I think also, yeah, okay, so this next point is like the other way how to measure it is to actually ask, again, like ask directly and measure satisfaction, your employee satisfaction with the recognition program that you have in place. And there are also so many different ways to do it. So it's back to Melissa's point. It could be like formal way where you have those like structured surveys and you launch them like quarterly or whatever that cadence for you is. But it also could be just part of your everyday processes in the organization. So like in the all hands meeting, why don't you bring the little icebreaker and you ask if people, like how many people overall are aware that we have a recognition program or this specific aspect of the recognition program, or like how they feel about their contribution. So you see like there are these different answer and question options here on the right, but that's just to remember that there is a variety of question types when you use, like in today's world, like you don't have to stick with just like the question and then ABC and then you just like choose one of the options. It could be something fun as this rating scale question with smiley faces. Do you feel recognized? Also, it could be open-ended question where you just provide that forum for everybody in the organization to contribute to what are those recognition forums that they could think about, what works for them. We all know that since pandemic, many organizations had to adjust the way how they work, strategize and like do their business differently. But that also came with the change in people's mindsets, and maybe something that worked for recognizing people like 2 years ago with the organization doesn't work anymore. And that is okay, because people have changed, the reality has changed. So ask them again and listen and hear, like, what are those suggestions that they might come up. That might be your next big thing. Like, first you start with this little experiment, and then that becomes the thing for your organization. Or if you already have multiple forms in place and you just want to see what of that resonates better with your employees, this is the ranking question, where you could just like list all those available options and see, like, get some quantitative data on what are the preferred methods for people to be recognized for their everyday work that they're doing. So again, like some of those question examples here on the slide, but I think the important takeaway here is when you think about that, don't just think about like this, I don't know, quarterly surveys, but think about different ways how you could make this conversational, make this part of the pulse checks. Do this question this time and then the different question next time. Use all hands meetings, like any opportunity that you know how your organization works. It's like make that part of the everyday processes, and that I think is what is your take on that, Lisa? I see you are. I feel like you.
I'm just nodding. Like I'm not even trying to underline anymore here. Like yes, I'm just nodding vigorously. I'm giving you passive recognition because I was giving you too much earlier. So I'm just going. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. All right. So this another point here is the third way is to actually measure participation, which I also think it's third and last here, but it's not the least important for sure. Because what's important here is to, again, the success of the recognition program is only as much as it's used, and it's used for the purpose that you originally had in mind. So active users, budget utilization, like what can you measure? But when you think about that, again, think about holistically overall within your company, but also make sure that you look into a little bit more details as to across different employee groups, because recognition is not only from manager to their direct reports, it's peer-to-peer recognition is extremely important as well. But then also in some organizations, recognition programs are strictly focused on like non-management personnel, but like what about your leadership team? They also need to be recognized, and they also want to hear thank you. Again, it's not just about that like big monetary bonus, it's just about knowing that you are being valued and you're being like recognized, and so you stay motivated. So again, across those different employee groups, across departments, across teams, across locations, I think one really important point here to that again is driven from personal experience, but we talked a little bit about this awards program, and you could nominate your colleague, your coworker, or for doing something, whether it's related to cultural pillars or to business goals for whatever they've done. What's sometimes the challenges that come with it is that some managers would like use it pretty much on a daily basis. They would recognize their team members like weekly, and they would give those awards, especially those like little monetary awards, like really nice gift cards or something. So it's obviously great, and I'm sure that those team members feel really motivated or appreciate what they're getting. But again, like, does this deteriorate the value? Because you just expect to get that every week. And it's not really the genuine recognition. And then what about other team members where the other manager might be actually doing it based on something very special, something like really, tied to their business objectives. So when different people just use those tools differently, that just might create some imbalance within the organization. So what you want to make sure is that there is, again, full transparency, and the all the tools, all the recognition options, like formal recognition options that are part of your program are being communicated to everybody within the organization, and they all know how to use it and when to use it, and they're encouraged to use it at a like balanced level.
I would just say on this like technology, like you mentioned, I know we're gonna have a question in a minute about it, but the technology piece, it makes tracking a lot easier, right? So even doing that SoGomatic, like I send the recognition to you, you send it to someone else. What I've realized every time that we've done it is we have some super recognizers, right? People who are just super enthusiastic, and they will consistently, when it comes to them, you can track like this person recognized 10 different, sort of this gorgeous looking sort of flow chart. As these people are like super excited about sharing that feedback, and they pass it to some other people who are super excited, or some people who will never pass it to someone else. So recognizing that it's a two-way situation as well, to recognize, to be recognized and to recognize others too. I think that's the thing. I think sometimes people are waiting around to be recognized in some ways, like, I did this, by the way, but also it's an opportunity to look around, to see those around you who are waiting to be recognized too, and to pay it forward, as it were.
100%, Melissa. And since you touched on the technology, let us bring this our next questions here. We are just really interested in hearing from you how likely are you to consider new technology to support your employee engagement efforts. This is a single option question. So just giving you a few seconds to please respond and let us know, where are you with technology? Do you maybe already have everything that you need? Or are you looking to add something new so you could do things differently next year? All right, I see the questions are coming in. So we are going to close the poll, show the results, and see. Well, I guess there are no surprises here, right?
Everything is possible, especially as you mentioned, we start to get toward the end of this year. I'm reflecting on this year and some things we could have done differently. But you're right, like the world is changing, people are changing, expectations are changing. I'm sad we don't get to do hand turkeys, like gotta hand it to you in the office anymore. I'm a little bit sad about that, but everything is possible in the new year as well too. So I think that's an optimistic look forward.
All right, and with that, we are done with the formal part of our webinar, and we are moving into Q&A section. So this is discussion time. If you have comments, if you have questions, we would love to hear from you. Again, the reminder that Q&A widget is on the bottom of your screen. Just send that question or comment to all panelists. We would gladly take it and discuss. Let's see if we have any questions at this time.
We did have one that came in a little bit even before we started,
yeah.
too, which was, how are you even supposed to get started? Like, this idea is really great. Is it better to get started just doing something in the first place, or is it absolutely critical to you that it needs to be strategic? Like, is it okay to have a balloon that's just a balloon sometimes? That's not, the person didn't use this balloon question, but that's a question for you. You're the one who's helping us stay focused on strategy. So would you say that that's important, or can you just sometimes?
So you're directing this question to me. All right, great. Well, what I could say is that as in any area, I think we always should go for the quick wins. So if you don't have anything in place, I do think that it's really important to start something. So start with a small experiment, and while that is running, you have time to strategize and think about bigger things. But it's really important to, I think, see those early results and early wins to get excitement levels going in your organization. And then it just gives you also some data and some energy to move forward. But what would be your answer to that, Melissa?
I agree. I like balloons for the sake of balloons. I think even ad hoc sometimes, there are people that I know in our organization and in other areas, places where I've worked, who are like I said, the super recognizers, who are like, I don't want to say the Oprah model, but like, you get a car and you get a car and you get a pat on the back, like that sort of thing. But there are some people who very rarely give feedback at all. And I cherish the positive feedback that I've received from those same people. I will not mention any names on this call, but there are a few people that they've given me like a connect dialogue that was like a compliment, like, great job on this training, this was really helpful. And because I see who is the person who chose to not be anonymous, they chose to share their feedback, and they're like, it's me. I was like, oh. So I think even just that random message from that random person was so appreciated by me, because I know how hard that person works, how little recognition that person receives. But the fact that they personally took it upon themselves to say, here's a compliment for you. It meant so much to me. And it wasn't like, it's part of my strategic goals to help with training and that kind of thing. But there was no like sort of, now at this time of day, I give recognition to anybody. So random, I think, is appreciated as well too. But if you realize it's something that's not going on at all, maybe it does need to be structured to start with a little bit. Like maybe it is 4 o'clock every day. What good have I seen in my day today? How can I start recognizing people, start building that it's not such a weird thing? Like, if somebody says, oh, great job. What do you mean great job? You never want people to be suspicious about your motivations for recognizing them. I saw what you did there. What was wrong with what I did? We want it to be positive, of course, as well too. So yeah, I like balloons as well too in this situation.
Right, so it seems like we have no other questions, but we received one comment, so or a tip, I should say. So Andrea just commented that what they found working for them is having this options to provide recognition anonymously, which I think is like also like really good idea to give people choice if they want to brag about it, and well, that thank you came from me, or that is just like a genuine thank you, but I don't necessarily want to be associated with it. I think that's also a good tip to consider.
I think it's a really good one too. We talk about that with SoGo Connect. You can remain hidden, so you can get feedback. You can be totally anonymous. Just a shout out for SoGomatic, we chose that it needed to be, you needed to identify yourself to the administrator to be like, yes, this is legit. But you could choose whether or not the person actually saw that shout out from you as well too. So I agree. I think it's really important too, whether to receive it anonymously or to give it anonymously. Like, I just left this Post-it note on your desk while you were gone giving this webinar, and you'll see it when you get back.
I wonder, Melissa, how you did that, given that you were here co-presenting with me on this webinar. But yeah, all right. So it looks like, again, no other questions or comments at this point. So if you are willing to continue this conversation and like have a one-on-one consultation with SoGoSurvey expert, we obviously would love that. As you could see on this next slide, there is a way how you could reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. Also, to let you know that you will receive an email within the next 24 hours with the recording of this webinar, with the slides. SoGomatic already promised you this fun tool that really worked for us well, and we hope that you'll get some ideas from that as well. So do share with your colleagues. Again, reach out, let us know if you have any questions or feedback. And thank you very much for coming to this webinar. Make it great, and may the recognition force be with you.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you all. Take care.